Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Shweta and I welcome you all to my channel Teaching Learning with Shweta. Today we'll be discussing a very famous debate in psychology known as the nature versus nurture. And this debate is also known as heredity versus environment. So what is this debate about? Well, this is a debate that has been happening since very long, and there are supporters of both the sides. There are many supporters who say that everything is because of heredity, and a lot of people, a lot of psychologists, a lot of researchers who do not support this but say that everything that we see and in terms of behavior, characteristics, traits in human beings, that is all shaped by environment. So there are two schools we can say, and this debate has been happening since long. So before we get deeper into what this debate is about and what actually is the truth, let's just understand the meaning of these two words, heredity and environment, or nature and nurture. Well, you must have heard a lot from people around you, like the statements like he or she looks like his or her mother, he or she behaves like his or her mother, he is short-tempered, that is because his mother is short-tempered or his grandmother is short-tempered. So we have often come across these kind of statements and sentences. So this means that a lot of how we behave, how we are, our characteristics, our traits, these all things, they come from our ancestors, from our parents primarily, and also a lot come from our grandparents and our ancestors. So this is what we refer to as heredity. We often say these things like it's in the genes. He's a soldier's son, he's a soldier's daughter, so that's so bravery is running in his or her genes. These are the sentences we use very commonly, and we also observe that there are similarities in terms of physical characteristics like complexion, skin tone, hair color, height, body structure, all, and even the voice modulation, voice quality, all these characteristics, the physical traits, they also are similar to our parents. Often they match the traits that are possessed by the parents. So we know this, that a lot of our characteristics, primarily the physical characteristics, they come from our parents. But not just the physical characteristics, we also often observe that behavioral traits, even temperaments, even aggression, even violent tendency, even empathetic tendencies, all these traits also sometimes are seen both in the parents and in the children. So people, they say that not just the physical characteristics but also the behavioral characteristics, the emotional characteristics, the social characteristics, they also get passed on from a generation to another through heredity. So the supporters of this school, they firmly believe that everything that an individual possesses, the physical characteristics, the social, emotional, moral, everything is something that is being inherited from the parents. Whereas there's another group that says that had this been the case, then how come language develops only in presence of others? How come the past experiences of childhood shape the behavior of an individual in future? This is Sigmund Freud's theory. Then there are so many examples that the supporters of environment give, that a lot of children who were raised by a kind of parents exhibited different kind of behavior, and parents who with different characteristics, their children exhibited different behavior. So the supporters of environment, they do not agree that everything is passed on genetically from parents. So this is the debate that we are going to take up today in today's lecture. Before this, we need to understand separately what heredity and environment mean. Now, the definition by Douglas and Holland, heredity consists of all the structures, physical characteristics, functions or capacities derived from parents or other ancestors. As I already discussed, that not only the physical characteristics like our complexion, our height, our way of our voice, or our hair color, all these things, not just these things, but also our functions, how we behave, our capacities, our cognitive abilities, our understanding of things in life, all these things come from either our parents or our ancestors. This definition given by Douglas and Hall. We all know how life starts. It starts from the union of the germ cells, spermatozoa and ova. And this results to production of, now I'm not going into details of all this, this comes under biology and genetics, but just a brief, just for an understanding of what actually we mean by heredity, this discussion is a little important. So as a result of the fusion of spermatozoa and ova, a zygote is formed, and the cytoplasm of this cell consists of a nucleus, and this nucleus consists of 23 pairs of chromosomes. ये सब हमने पढ़ा है, we've all read all these things. These chromosomes have genes, and these genes are believed to carry these individual traits. तो ये जितने भी हमारे अंदर traits हैं, ये genes में होते हैं, जो chromosomes में होते हैं. And these chromosomes, the 23 pairs come from our father and 23 come from the mother. So, just summing it up, genes, they carry traits, that is the characteristics that we exhibit. And human beings, they get these traits equally from both the parents, from the mother and the father. And therefore, all these characteristics, the physical characteristics and the definition that we just read, all the physical characteristics, the capacities, the abilities, they get transferred from these genes, from the parents to us. And that is heredity. But the parents have also got these from their ancestors. So it is quite possible that when pairing is happening between chromosomes, then these genes may come from the ancestors to us. And they may not have expressed those characteristics in our parents, but they get expressive in us. And therefore, it is very possible that a child of a parent may be of a different complexion from their parents, but similar to the grandparents. तो ऐसे बहुत सारे ट्रेट्स होते हैं जो पेरेंट्स में नहीं होते हैं, क्योंकि वो पेरेंट्स में एक्सप्रेस नहीं हो पाए हैं, क्योंकि कॉम्बिनेशन कैसा होगा that really does not have any, we can't actually predict. तो कौन सा ट्रेट किससे आएगा, this we are never sure about, but it may be passed on from our grandparents, from any of our maternal, paternal aunt or uncle, and it may come to us. So this is basically what we understand in layman words as what heredity means here. So as I already discussed, 23 pairs of chromosomes coming from the mother and the father both, 23 from each parent. So that is what we mean by heredity. Now let's come to what we understand by environment. When we say heredity versus environment, what we mean by environment. The definition by Wordsworth and Marquis, environment covers all the outside factors that have acted on individuals since he began life. So जब से individual इस दुनिया में आया है, जो भी बाहर की चीजें उसे मिली हैं, वो होता है उसका environment. But environment is not only, so from the time of conception क्या है, when the spermatozoa fertilized the ova and the zygote was formed, the conception happened. That is when the woman, the mother gets pregnant and the child is inside the body of the mother. That also has an environment. Inside the body of the mother also there is an environment. अब उस environment में उसको क्या मिलता है, nourishment मिल रहा है, care मिल रही है, safety मिल रही है, that is also a kind of environment which decides the characteristics later. So birth के पहले का environment, डिलीवरी के टाइम क्या environment था, क्या वो C-सेक डिलीवरी थी, क्या वो नेचुरल डिलीवरी थी, क्या वो हाइजीनिक कंडीशंस में हुई थी या अनहाइजीनिक कंडीशंस में हुई थी, या सेफ था सब कुछ, और द मदर वाज सब्जेक्टेड टू सम काइंड ऑफ एंजाइटी or the mother was not taken care of. All that becomes a part of the environment. Then when the baby came out of the mother's body, when the mother delivered the baby, that environment that the baby got also plays a very important role. How the newborn baby was taken care of, the immediate care that was given to the mother and the baby, mother's milk, nutrition, all those things. Then when the baby grows up into a child, the kind of family the baby gets, that's also his or her environment. कि कैसे parents का behavior है, how the family members, how the family dynamics is like, is there a lot of violence in the family, is there a lot of fights happening in the family, or the family members are peaceful, and there are good relations between all the members, if it's a nuclear family or a joint family. So that is the family environment, which also plays a very important role in shaping the characteristics of an individual, as the supporters of environment say. Then the environment and the educational institutions, when the child grows up and starts going to school and then to college, the kind of teachers the child gets, the kind of the kind of training, the kind of environment at school, the exposure that the child gets from educational institutions, from the family or his or her own, the experiences in relationships, work, all these things, they form the external environment that an individual gets. So right from the time of conception to coming out of the mother's body, to being a baby, to being a child, to being an adult, to being a student, to being a working person, to being in a relationship, a married person, all the time we are getting exposed to some kind of environment which is shaping our characteristics. So it's not just heredity. The supporters of environment say that is leading to how we behave or how we look like, and how we maybe the physical characteristics, they do look like they are similar to our parents, but a lot of other factors, that is the environment at the time of, during the before birth, during the time of birth, and later after birth till our lifetime, that also decides the kind of behavioral characteristics and traits we'll possess. So that is what we mean by environment here. Now, what is this debate between nature and nurture? Let's just come to this debate. Well, the people, the philosophers, the psychologists who all have been extreme supporters of heredity, they are known as nativists. And some of them are Freud. Freud, however, Sigmund Freud, a very famous psychologist, also known as the father of psychoanalysis. Now, he had discussed aggression as Thanatos in one of his theories, and he had said that this is an innate drive. It is not acquired. It is something which is already there in an individual, and it is related to death instincts in the theory that he had spoken about instincts. So he, although was also a supporter of the fact that environment that the adults give also shape the behavior, but here when he has discussed thanatos and the innate drive for aggression, that aggression is innately present in human beings, in that this discussion, this theory hints towards heredity or something that is naturally there. So we can put him under the nativist category because of this discussion that he has done in one of his theories. Now we also see there is another famous psychologist, Chomsky, who has said that the language acquisition device, the way we acquire language, we learn language, that machinery is already there in our brain, and it is inherited, and it is not something that develops through environment over time. It is already there. The environment does support in learning, but it is already present in the cognitive structure of the mind of humans. So here also he is a nativist who does not support environment in shaping the language or language acquisition. Mendel, we know, has given the laws of inheritance. He has explained in details how some traits become dominant, some traits they are repressed, and how they get segregated. So all his laws of inheritance, they strongly support heredity, and we base our heredity, the understanding of heredity, a lot on his theories and his laws. Then Charles Darwin has also spoken about how the struggle for the survival of the fittest, it leads to gradual changes in traits and characteristics, and that is how, in order to survive, the human beings, they acquire traits, and those traits are carried on by generations. He has also been a supporter of this. He hasn't been a supporter of environment playing a role. Then Galton, he also had discussed that as as the generations keep coming, the parents, then the children, and the grandparents, the the amount of the characteristics that get passed on go on reducing in fractions. That is, we get half of what our parents had, and 1/4 comes from our grandparents, and 1/8 comes from our great grandparents, and like that, and so on. So, so his studies also pointed clearly that heredity exists and traits pass on from one generation to another. Wiesmann also had given theories in which he had spoken about how the acquired traits don't pass on. That is, if I go and get a haircut, then when I will have children, my children will not have short hair or hair exactly in the pattern I got them cut. They will have, if I go bald because of some illness, my children will not be born bald or will not have the same disease. So acquired traits are not inherited. A dog will be born to dog, a giraffe will be born to a giraffe, a human will be born to a human. And there have been cases that both the parents have been deaf and dumb, but the child was not deaf and dumb. So this discussion, it shows that heredity has a role to play when things are being transferred from the parents to the children, and only the natural traits are being inherited. Modified traits are not being inherited. Lamarck also had a discussion that his theory was quite close to the discussion that was taken up in Charles Darwin's theory, that he had given an example that the giraffes, they did not have such long necks, but because of the effort they used to make in stretching their necks, their generations they started having longer necks. So if an individual is engaging, or all the individuals of any species are engaging in certain activities leading to modification in their limbs, then that trait gets passed on gradually to the future generations. And this also has links with heredity. So all these people, and there were more, I just discussed a few. These psychologists, these researchers, and these scientists were very much in favor of heredity and traits being passed on from one generation to another. And that is how the behavior and the physical characteristics of individuals are like. But then there were a group of people who said that everything that we see in an individual, his or her behavior, his or her appearance, it does not necessarily come from parents, but environment has a very important role to play in shaping the behavior. Bandura, I have listed him at the first place here. Bandura had conducted an experiment in which he had put children in a room and he had shown some models hitting the Bobo dolls. And aggression was what he was trying to model to those children. So, and another group of children, they were not exposed to this kind of violence. So later on, when these children were put in a separate room and given Bobo dolls, he observed that the children who were exposed to aggression and that kind of behavior was modeled before them, they copied that behavior, and they were aggressive to those Bobo dolls. Whereas the other group of children who were exposed to this kind of, who were not exposed to this kind of behavior, they were not aggressive. So this led him to conclude that aggression is because of environment. It was acquired by children not because of their parents or heredity, but because of what they saw in their environment and how they modeled it. Similarly, Skinner, we already know Skinner is a renowned uh, behavioral psychologist who has talked in details about conditioning, operant conditioning, and the role of rewards in shaping behavior. He also suggests that language is not happening because of what Chomsky is saying, that there are innate structures, but language is completely socially acquired, and it happens through conditioning. Vygotsky, we've studied in details about Vygotsky that society, culture, environment plays a very important role in shaping the behavior and development of an individual. Now here, Freud, I've mentioned Freud again and under Nurturist because the theory in which Freud explains how the childhood experiences and the effects of those experiences on the childhood, on a child's behavior, reflect later in his or her life when that child becomes an adult. So this is quite a proof in itself that Freud is trying to say that environment is playing a role. Earlier, Freud had said, he had talked about thanatos, that is the aggression, drive, and all these instincts being naturally present in individuals. So heredity playing a role here because it's already there, naturally there. But here again, in his theories, he has discussed in details about how the fears, anxieties, and the experiences in childhood affect the behavior, the adult behavior. So, of course, he's pointing out here that environment plays a very important role. Then Watson had also conducted an experiment in which he was also a psychologist who had actually given us classical conditioning theories. So he had exposed a child to a rat and played loud noises, and because the child was scared of loud noises, gradually presenting the rat along with loud noise led the child to be scared of rat. So again, this fear was something that came in the child because of the exposure to loud sound along with the rat. So that means that this fear was something that came from the environment. It was not passed on from his parents. That is how he concluded that mind of an individual is a blank state, and whatever is a blank slate, and whatever the environment gives gets impressioned on it. So all these people that I discussed, Bandura, Skinner, Vygotsky, Freud, John Watson, they all were supporters of environment playing an important role in shaping the characteristics of an individual. But there were many more. So let's see the experiments both the parties did to prove their stance. The Nurturists and the Nativists. The Nativists supporting the heredity, responsible for behavior and traits, and Nurturists supporting the environment. What were the experiments performed by hereditarians? It was seen that Freeman was a psychologist. He conducted experiments on IQ. He attempted to study correlations between the IQ, intelligence quotient, of identical twins, fraternal twins, siblings, and cousins. Now, they all were related by blood, but the relationship was the strongest in identical twins, because we all know that the ova divides equally into two halves during fertilization, gets fertilized by this spermatozoa, and that is how we get identical twins. The fraternal twins, in case of fraternal twins, they two separate ova get fertilized. Siblings are they have an age group, and cousins, they are brothers and sisters from different parents. So the blood relation gets weaker from the identical twins to cousins. It was seen that the correlation between the IQ scores of identical twins was the highest. The correlation coefficient was 0.9, and in the fraternal twins it was still high but lesser than that of identical twins. It was 0.6. It was further less in the siblings, and further that the siblings are the children of the same parents, and very less in the cousins. So intelligence is a trait, and intelligence was related very strongly. It was similar in case of identical twins. So it's quite a proof in itself that intelligence, which is a trait, it is getting passed on through heredity, and heredity is playing a role in it. Now let's talk about some social traits, because intelligence is clearly a cognitive one. So corruption. So the corrupt fisherman experiment was conducted by Dugdale. Duke was corrupt in nature, and Dugdale found out in his studies that the future generations of Duke were also corrupt, and most of them, they took up the professions in which they had a lot of they were involved in a lot of corrupt practices. So heredity playing a role in transferring a social trait also, which is the corruption, the trait of corruption. Galton Francis also conducted experiments, and his experiment was also based on IQ. He studied genius people with high IQ and average people with moderate IQ, and it was found that the generations of when he studied the IQ of generations coming from the genius people, it was saying that 536 people of these genius generations, they had high IQ. and the rest, and very few were average. So genius people with high IQ had generations with high IQ. In general, maximum people were high IQ. Whereas when he studied the IQ of average people and their generations, and only 4 people with high IQ were found. So there was a strong relationship between the IQs of parents and children, as could be concluded from these experiments. Then there was one other very famous experiment conducted by H. Goddard. If you can see this blue arrow, that's a person who was married to 2 women. If you look above this blue arrow, you will see his own history, his parents and his grandparents. So when you look at the arrow and two deviations, 2 demarcations, you will see that towards the right, so he married 2 ladies. You can see one circled as F and one as N. So N was the normal wife, and F is representing another woman who was little feeble-minded. So he married 2 ladies. If you see the blue arrow, you would see that there are 2 letters, N and F. So N refers to the lady. He married 2 women. So N here depicts the normal woman, and F refers to feeble-minded, the woman with low IQ. So he had children and future generations from both these women, and it was found that in the generations from woman that was normal, all the offsprings were normal. And from the woman who was feeble-minded that he had married, the generations had many offsprings with feeble-mindedness. So this again was proving that intelligence is inherited. Then it was also seen by a study of Plomin and De Vries that the adopted kids were not resembling to their parents in many traits, not just they would of course not be resembling in physical traits, but even in the social and a lot of traits, they were not resembling their parents as much as the biological kids were resembling with their parents. So this study was also conducted, and it was found that heredity is playing a role. But the Nurturists also conducted their experiments. If the hereditarians, they proved that all these traits are being transferred by heredity, then the Nurturists were also conducting experiments and showing the role of the environment in shaping the personality. Ramu was a boy. He was left in the den of a wolf, and he was left left in a jungle, and that is where he was raised by these animals, by wolves. So later when he was rescued, it was found that his characteristics, his behavior was very similar to wolves. He was not behaving like a human boy at all. He was walking on 4 legs, and he was displaying the behavior displayed by wolves, because he was taken care of by the wolves when he was a baby. So this shows that, so he did not have behavior close to humans. This showed that our personality and characteristics is shaped by the environment and not heredity, because his parents were humans, but he was only exposed to wolves and animals when he was a baby. Then Amla and Kamla, these were also wolf girls. They were also rescued from jungle, and one of these girls had died after being rescued, but the other girl was subject to studies, and it was found that her behavior was also very close to wolves' behavior. Then Jensen had conducted a study to find out whether black and white, I'm sorry for the spelling mistake. So whether the black or the whites, they differed in their IQs, the black Americans. And it was found that the IQ of the black Americans was in general low in comparison to the IQ of white Americans. So he concluded that this is the whites are more intelligent than the blacks. But then there was a lot of protest and storm around the study, and then later on a lot of other experiments were done, and it was found that it was not in the blood, but the reason was social in nature. from the start, because of the deprivation, because of the lack of resources and lack of facilities and lack of opportunities, the blacks were devoid of a lot of facilities, and which is why their all generations, they did not have high IQ. So it was the environment, the depriving environment, responsible for low IQs, the low quality schooling and education, and the discrimination that they were exposed to, which is why their IQs were low. So what is the truth? It is the nature or the nurture, it's the heredity or the environment. What should we conclude? Well, it's actually what, on the basis of these experiments, these researches, and a number of studies, people have started concluding that it is neither the nature absolutely that is playing a role, the heredity that is playing a role, nor the environment which is completely playing the role in shaping the behavior and the physical and all characteristics of the individual. It's basically the interaction between the two. It's the multiplication between the two. So now people and scientists are not interested in studying them separately, but studying the interaction effects on individuals. So there's a branch called epigenetics, which says, in which there's a discussion that yes, genes that come from our parents, that are passed on from generation to generation, they do carry our traits, they do carry our characteristics, but how these characteristics will express or come out in us, that is something the environment decides. तो यहाँ पे एपिजेनेटिक्स में ये कहा जा रहा है कि ट्रेट्स तो होते हैं जो हमारे बिहेवियर और कैरेक्टर्स को डिसाइड करते हैं, बट ज़रूरी नहीं, और वो जीन्स हो सकता है पास ऑन हो गया, इंटेलिजेंस का जीन्स हो सकता है हमारे पेरेंट्स से हमारे पास ट्रांसफ़र हो गया, लेकिन वो हम में दिखेगा कि नहीं और कितना ज़्यादा दिखेगा, कितना एक्सप्रेस होगा, ये एनवायरनमेंट डिसाइड करता है। तो यहाँ पे रोल हेरिडिटी का भी है और एनवायरनमेंट का। So these genes, they get transferred to us, carrying those characteristics, they get transferred from our parents to us, but how much they will show in us, that is being affected by the environment. So sometimes if during birth or after birth there is an environment of stress and the child is subjected to a lot of stress throughout his life, or even as an adult, then those stressors and memories can pass through genes to his future generations, and without any reason the future generations may also be a little anxious for no reason, and this lasts for few generations. This has been seen during the Second World War, when there was a famine. Children were deprived of food and they were under a lot of distress and anxiety, and it was seen that all those women who were pregnant during that time and the children who were born during that time, their future generations for a long time, even though they were not subject to those kind of deprivations, even they carried these tendencies of health problems, anxiety and distress. So these stressors in a life may be carried on from these genes to few coming generations. तो कुछ generations तक effect रहता है. तो genes जो हैं वो usually हमारे जो characteristics को pass on करते हैं from parents to children, उनमें से कुछ genes anxiety वाले, distress वाले या किसी भी type के genes environment से जो effect हो रहा है उसकी वजह से वो carry हो जाते हैं in future generations. So now the researchers have started focusing on interaction than studying heredity and environment separately. आप देखिए यहाँ पे मैंने कुछ ऐसे sayings लिखी हुई हैं, like I have noted down a few sayings that support this notion that both heredity and environment together play a role. It's not heredity playing a role separately or environment playing a role separately. They both are interacting together and shaping the behavior and the characteristic and personality of an individual and the traits of an individual. Garrett says nothing is more certain than the heredity and environment are co-acting influences that both are essential to achievement. मतलब इस बात की तो श्योरिटी है कि heredity और environment दोनों influence कर रहे हैं achievement को. McIver and Page, they say every phenomenon of life is a product of both. Each is as necessary to the result as other, and neither can be eliminated nor be isolated. So both heredity and environment are important. They both are playing a role and they cannot be studied separately or removed from each other. Wordsworth and Marquis, this we have already studied. The relationship of heredity environment is not addition but multiplication. So basically हो क्या रहा है, heredity और environment का multiplication हो रहा है. Heredity हमारा base है जो हमें पेरेंट्स से मिल रहा है, वो हमारे लिए बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है डिसाइड करने के लिए कि हाउ वी विल बिहेव. सो वट एवर वी गेट फ्रॉम द पेरेंट्स इन द फॉर्म ऑफ आवर जीन्स decides our personality to a great extent, but then how that personality will express, that is shaped by environment. So the base is heredity and the environment is deciding how that heredity will be expressed. So basically it's the multiplication of two to have the whole area. So this is how personality is shaped by both heredity and environment. And now the scientists and researchers are more interested in studying the effects of both rather than studying the effects of these two separately. Why did we study this? Why it is important to study both the effects of heredity and environment, and then why this debate was taken up today by me? Because both heredity and environment play an important role. And as a teacher, we should know about the role of both. अब heredity से क्या क्या चीज़ें आ रही हैं? What all things we get from our parents, the intelligence, if there is any family history, a medical history, or a mental illness history, or a physical health illness, there is always a chance of that being transferred to the children. So as teachers, we should have complete records of children, not to shame them or not to discuss about that openly, but just for our information and knowledge that this is a problem that runs in the family. This is a condition that runs in the family. There's a history of this medical condition runs in the family, or this physical health condition runs in the family. It can be good also, it can be bad also. So that knowledge will always help us in dealing with that child. And in future, if the child has a problem, the child can be given the required help. So hereditary issues, hereditary things, the record of all these things should be maintained and is valuable to us, or this information is valuable. Even if now if you go to a psychologist, the first thing that the psychologist would do would start taking your case history. So case history, family history, that a little bit of knowledge about the background from where the child comes is very important, and also information about the environment of the child. The child may be coming from an environment which is not very motivating. घर पे बहुत ज़्यादा motivating environment नहीं होगा, पढ़ाई का environment नहीं होगा. Maybe the child is coming from a family where the rest of the hours after school, the child is being forced to work and earn money for the family. So the attention and the enthusiasm of and the concentration level of that child will obviously be lower in comparison to a child who comes from a very motivating environment and a family that gives all the support and care and affection to the child. So you as a teacher have to understand the differences in environment. If a child is behaving in certain manner, then the environment is responsible for that. And of course, we also have to build a supportive environment, a secure environment, a safe physically, mentally, and socially. The society also has to take this responsibility to provide for children, because what we give to the child from as environment plays a very important role in shaping their personality. We also have to keep our expectations reasonable and unbiased. ज़रूरी नहीं है कि IIT टॉपर का बेटा या बेटी भी IIT टॉपर निकले, या एक इंजीनियर का बेटा इंजीनियर निकले, टीचर का बेटा टीचर निकले, या एक सिंगर का बेटा या बेटी वैसे ही गाए. It's not necessary, and we should not put that pressure on our children to do what the parents have done or what we expect from them. So we should as teachers take care that heredity and environment both are playing a role. It is our responsibility to know the elements that are passed on from heredity and also take care of the environment that the child is getting to gain education and become a complete fulfilling individual. These are the references that a few of these images that I used were taken from these references in this presentation. So that's all from my side regarding this debate, nature versus nurture. If you have any questions, queries, or comments or feedback, do post in the comment section, and do subscribe to my channel and keep liking my videos so that I get motivated to create more and more videos of this kind. Thank you. Have a nice day.